One thing separates average design from great design, and that's iteration. Iteration is conducting an experiment like a scientist. You have controls, which stay the same, and then the variable that changes. You want the tests to be quick so that you can choose the best one and then move on to the next test. In this pattern that I'm making, there are many different elements I could iterate. The collar, the shape and the length of the left and right sleeves, the shape and length of the hem, the darts, the thickness of the binding, the fabrics, the colors, prints, buttons, piping or binding, linings and facings. Iteration is about getting as close to the solution as possible. Rene Magritte described his art as solving problems. So he had this painting of a tree and it was the problem of the tree and he was solving it by turning it into a painting. There's a concept and a feeling, and the problem is figuring out how that abstract thing translates into the physical world. The solution is whatever feels most true to that concept. Sketching is the quickest way to start. Here I wanted to see the best shape for the hem of the shirt. I'm choosing based on what looks most pleasing as a whole, but I'm also staying true to my concept. The concept needs to be expressed in every design choice so that the design is cohesive. I ended up going with the pointier shape because it's reminiscent of a traditional pajama shirt, which has a right-angled corner, which has begun to droop like the fabric was melting. Wax melts in a round blob shape, but fabric is in a right-angled grid, so it felt most true to imagine how the fabric might melt rather than making the fabric appear to be candle wax. I like to work in threes because 3 points creates a spectrum. In this example, the spectrum is about the physics of the material. Does it behave like fabric or like wax? By placing each design choice on its own spectrum, you create dimensionality and depth to the design because it has its position in conceptual space. And the more spectrums you can have and the more positions on those spectrums, the more real and solid it's going to feel. Once the design choices are finalized, you can move on to physical 3D testing. Sketches are magical because everything works in your imagination and you can design without limits, but when you reach the sample making stage, you have to start facing more technical problems. Like, how does the collar actually wrap around the back of the neck? It worked in my sketch and it worked in my imagination, but when I tried to turn it into a pattern, it became more difficult. You can work at smaller scales depending on what you're designing. A 1/3 scale is really good because it'll usually fit on an A3 sheet of paper. It's important when you're iterating that you stay organized. When I made version 4 of this sleeve, I realized that the sleeve head had become distorted and it didn't fit the 3D body anymore. So I was able to go back to version 2 where I didn't have that issue to create version 5. If I had chopped up version 2 to make version 3, I wouldn't be able to go back and work with it. At the end of each iteration, I like to write down what needs to be fixed in the next iteration so that I know where I'm going and I don't get lost in the weeds. Taking photos is a great way to document the process because you can quickly look back and see which versions worked and which didn't. A toile is a full-scale sample in a cheap material like cotton calico, like the one behind me. Once I'm happy with the toile, I know that the pattern is solid and I can move on to the materials and finishes. Each material behaves differently, which adds a new variable to the design. You'd rather know about these variables before wasting your time and resources. So you need to test at full scale, but only a small part of the design. Ideally, it's a complex area so that you can find the problems before they find you. I know that bias tape can become wobbly around curves, so I'll test it at my tightest curve. I've heard that synthetic bias tape has the biggest problem with this, so I want to test cotton, polyester, and silk bias tape and compare the results. Then the iteration is finished and I can make the final thing. If you enjoyed seeing the process of this pattern, you can find the full behind-the-scenes pattern making video over on Patreon.